¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?
Welcome to CHIRLA TV. In the past, gaps in the public insurance system and lack of access to affordable private coverage left millions without health insurance. By 2013, more than 44 million people lacked coverage. According to the California Health Interview Survey, approximately 3 million people in California remain uninsured. Around half of those are actually undocumented immigrants, some of the people that are most in need of services. During the Democratic presidential debate, all major candidates indicated that their healthcare plans would include undocumented immigrants. To discuss this more in detail and what's happening at the state level, we are joined here today by our powerful Senator, Elena Durazo, who happens to be my representative. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you.
Elena Durazo has been a longtime advocate for immigrant rights and champion of the labor rights movement, not only here locally in California, but at the national level. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We are also joined by CHIRLA's Policy Director, Joseph Villela. Thank you so much for coming back to the show.
Thank you for the invitation. We're going to go ahead and start, if it's okay with you, Senator. Can you tell us what drives you and your work in these times?
Well, I think it has to do, like a lot of us, my story. My personal story is having grown up in a mixed status family. My parents and my older sisters were born in Mexico, in Sonora, and then my father came here to work in the fields, and then we grew up as migrant family from town to town to town. So I could see what it was, how we were being treated, just because we were Mexican or just because they thought we were immigrants or whatever the issue was. It didn't matter. We didn't make enough to put food on the table. We didn't make enough to put shelter over our heads many, many times. So I think that's the main reason. The second reason is when I was in high school and went away to college, there was a lot of movement going on. The anti-war movement, the farm workers movement, the African-American civil rights movement, student movement, all this was going on. So while maybe I could have been stuck as far as what to do in my life, it became clear when I became involved with the movements around me.
That's really exciting work. And what led you to actually take a leadership position in college?
Well, whether it was in college or in the union, I didn't see myself as being a leader, I think as most of us, but I saw myself as being active and supporting others. Eventually, people told me, you have to run for this, or you have to take this role. And reluctantly, I did it. And, each step, it was because I was surrounded by people who supported me, who were a team, who were around me. When I saw the courage of immigrants, when I saw the courage of men and women in the workplace, standing up for their rights, that gave me the strength to say, okay, I'll take another step.
And that you have done, taken another step, especially in these trying times for the immigrant community, people of color in the nation that are seeing that they're being under attack by this administration. And so, given that the policies that have coming out of Washington, D.C. and the anti-immigrant rhetoric, what have you done here as a senator so far? Although you're recently a freshman senator, and you've done a lot. So if you can share a little bit of what that has looked like.
Well, you started by talking about health care, and I tried to take the baton from Senator Ricardo Lara, who's now our insurance commissioner. He started the whole push to make sure that if you're low income and you meet the requirements, then everybody should have access to health insurance, and in this case, Medi-Cal. Undocumented were excluded from the ACA, explicitly banned and excluded. Undocumented cannot even buy in the health exchange program, so you can't even buy it at a rate that seems fair. So I decided that would be my very first bill introduced in the state, and it's been tough because there's all kinds of excuses given both by Republicans and Democrats. So we have to keep pushing hard. So my bill is to pick up where Ricardo's bill left off, which was 0 to 18 years for minors, and to push forward on everybody else. The governor agreed from 19 to 25, but right now we're pushing for the elders, are 65 and over. There are not that many, but they really, really need it. They're the most vulnerable. They should not be working after 65. So we really, that's the first bill I decided to introduce.
That's great because our parents are aging, our immigrant parents are aging. I think in America, in the United States, there's this misconception that we're like Peter Pan here, right? That we're staying stuck in one age. And although immigrant population is relatively younger than the average other demographics, our parents are aging. Yeah, so thank you for your work, and please stay tuned after these commercial breaks. We'll be right back.
¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?
Welcome back to CHIRLA TV, and here we are discussing the Healthcare Act and what CHIRLA is actually doing at the local, state, and the federal level as well. So Joseph, can you talk to us a little bit of how it is that you're collaborating with Senator Durazo, what CHIRLA is doing right here in California?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we want to say like the tone at the federal level is very dangerous. We've seen how the tone from the president has actually led to different actions, and obviously our hearts and prayers are with those, but then actions need to happen at the federal level. So what we're seeing is that due to the lack of immigration reform, we've seen this lack of immigrant integration. And so for us, immigrant integration means that it's just more than just having a green card or work permit. It's making sure that immigrants are actually part of our society, that they feel welcome, but they also have responsibilities as citizens, and citizens define it broadly. And so for us, that's what we have an agenda at the national level that pushes immigrant integration. And in the absence of action at the federal level, what we're pushing is action at the state level by having an aggressive immigrant integration agenda. And that's why we're working very closely with Senator Durazo, but then also the leadership of the state legislature, too, the chairwoman of the Latino caucus and the vice chair of the Latino caucus, to make sure that we move forward a bold agenda. And one of them is to make sure that immigrants really feel welcome here in the state. But then two, immigrants are also taxpayers at the federal, state, and local level. And we want to make sure that those dollars that they're invested at all levels actually go back to those communities. And I think that's what we're looking forward to, a budget that is for all, but it's also for immigrants as well. And that includes having access to healthcare. And so for us, we want to tackle immigration reform at the federal level. We really want to tackle the issues regarding detention conditions. We've seen pictures, but more importantly, we see deaths that have happened. And we, at the federal level, unfortunately, the president is not holding himself accountable, nor those agencies. So that's why we're moving those agendas at the state level.
That's really interesting because I remember at first when the president took office, many legislators swore that they were going to create a firewall right here in California, that California was going to be a firewall to Trump's attacks. And not only is it a firewall, but when you're talking about immigrant integration, it's now like we're talking about a ladder, right? Where we're going towards equality and equity. And so, Senator, if you can talk a little bit about how is it that you are working towards integration of immigrants here in California?
Sure, and I it's important that we add real substance to our words, because a lot of times we can get swept away with a lot of nice words. And I think our proposals in the legislature have to be really strong. So that's one of the things that we're looking to change with CHIRLA's help, is to allow everyone to serve on boards and commissions, whether they're state or local level. We have hundreds of boards and commissions, and the expertise, the life experiences of immigrants, regardless of your status, should be included, whether you're born here or not. They contribute. their barbers, their teachers, their students, their parents. They know through life experiences what should be the best rules and regulations, and it's through boards and commissions that all of that advice gets to the legislature. So it is really important to have the voice of undocumented. It's really important, especially because there's 2 million undocumented in California. We work together, we live together, we go to school together. We're integrated, in fact, in the economy, in schools, everywhere else. Why would we allow ourselves to be segregated when it comes to boards and commissions? So it's really important for a really strong democracy to have us all included while we struggle and fight for that immigration reform on the federal level.
Right. Are there any resources that our viewers can look into, that they can research so that they're a little bit more informed and know about CHIRLA's policies in your own?
Yeah, so definitely they can go into the center's website, Instagram, and Twitter. But then also at the state level, the support that people can go and just literally search immigration, and you'll have all the positive bills that the legislature has implemented, but then also introduced. But I think more in regards to the board and commissions, one of the things that is very important for us to know is that the way that we see that bill is for immigrants to be civically engaged, because that's a good way for them to directly have change and have their voices heard, as Senator Durazo indicated. But most importantly, for them to not to be afraid of government, and as there's a potential path for them to become citizens, if they fix their status or there's an immigration reform, they already have the expertise, and we're building the leaders that will take over the state legislature later on, and maybe one of them will become a new senator, Senator Durazo, or a new governor. So I think the way that we see this is civically engage our community, but more importantly, the definition of civically engaged is really broad for us. That includes undocumented immigrants as well.
Well, and they're also included, undocumented are included when knock on doors and make phone calls to those who already have the right to vote. I mean, we have been doing this for many years. So in every step of the way, undocumented immigrants, citizens, we're families and communities that are of mixed status. And we don't want that distinction to be made anywhere along the lines. And you're right, taking responsibility. When I was with the union, we had workers, housekeepers, dishwashers, all knocking on the doors, even if they didn't have citizenship status. It doesn't have anything to do with it as far as I'm concerned. We have a responsibility to teach them, train them, involve them so that they could get involved. So along those lines, go to your assembly person and tell them that you want them to support this legislation. So SB 225 is the boards and commissions. Call your assembly member. That's where the vote's going to take place next. And we need all the support that we can get. So when it gets to the governor's desk, then he will be ready to sign it.
That's right. You can help us build bridges. Call your assembly member to take action now. We'll be back after this short break.
¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?
Welcome back to CHIRLA TV. We have here again our guests, Joseph and Senator Mariana Durazo, who have been talking to us about politics at the federal level and at the state level. And so we're going back to the federal level. Joseph, if you can go ahead and share a little bit about current events, right? We know that there's massive immigrant detention going on at the southern border and across the country. Can you speak a little bit about that?
So first, we want to say that, the big problem that we have is this, tactics of enforcement-only policies that it started back in 1996, in which we created this monster, and every single year the federal government is feeding into that monster of immigration enforcement, and one of them is immigration detention. And so we're spending billions of dollars of our taxpayer money into actually putting immigrants into detention centers. Right. And we're expanding the definition of who should be in detention centers. Before, it was very narrow, and now it's actually really broad. That includes those individuals that are seeking asylum. Before, they were just given a court date and make their case. Now they are being forced to put in detention centers. And so one of the big issues that we have at the national level is, one, zero accountability towards DHS. And so the question becomes, after death, after death, after death, not only of adults, but then also children, who is responsible for that? Congress has tried to hold the Secretary of DHS responsible. However, we have this administration that has changed DHS Secretary for at least 3 times already. That's one aspect of it. And the second one, we have an administration that strongly believes that immigrants should be detained, that strongly believes that immigrants should only come from countries that are white or Christian. And so we have essentially a problem of white nationalism, and those tactics are being implemented towards essentially incarcerating our individuals and essentially making a profit out of the deaths of our immigrant brothers and sisters. And I think that's why, because of the lack of action, again, at the federal level, we're moving forward and trying to figure out what's the jurisdiction at the state level.
And I understand there's the introduction of SB 622, which is dignity in detention, because we're seeing in California as well, religious groups and peoples of all faith coming together and just really expressing their anger towards what this administration is doing. But we've seen it time and time again that our faith leaders get arrested in these actions. Senator Durazo, these are the communities getting together and showing and expressing their anger. What is it that you're doing in your office to counteract this narrative of immigrants are bad people?
So one of the things is that there's no accountability in these. Remember, they're civil detention centers. We're not talking about criminal. These are civil detention centers. Immigration is a civil matter. That there is no accountability in these detention centers for what happens to those men, women, and children. Before September of 2018, there were as many deaths as there have been since. In a matter of 6-7 months, more deaths have occurred in these detention centers. And so we have to do something about it. So I introduced Senate Bill 622 to have some dignity. And that would require, if there is any death in the hands of a civil detention center, that it would immediately, within 2 hours, have to be reported to the Attorney General of California, and the Department of Justice would have the authority and the jurisdiction to conduct an investigation to find out what happened, and in time certain, not just depending on when ICE decides to do it or they don't decide to do it, what information they give us or don't give us. So this is really important. We have to shed light on these terrible conditions that lead to people dying. But there is no procedure. So we really want to pass this legislation, which would help open the doors and require an investigation and a report to be done on deaths.
So let me get this straight. The federal government does not have to report when someone dies in one of the detention centers?
They have to report within 90 days, what happens in that time, what happens to a full investigation, what happens to those that are found. I've never heard that anybody is found guilty of death happening in their custody. So we want to make sure it's done by an independent source, not ICE. Not ICE research investigating themselves, but an independent, which would be the Attorney General of California.
And can you speak on that? Like, why is an independent source needed and not ICE or the federal government?
Again, what this administration has done is actually, as they're trying to increase their anti-immigrant policies, they're also at the same time giving big contracts to private contractors. So many of these detentions are actually privately owned. So that means that a corporation is actually making profits out of people's being detained. They make about $300 per day or per night when an immigrant is detained. So it's in the best interest of that company to have as many immigrants for as long as they can, so that way they can get a big fight check. And so for us, it's important to have the Attorney General of California, because many detention centers are in California, so we have jurisdiction over them, and they're a private company that we can hold them accountable.
And many times, if I could jump in, the cities that have the jurisdiction do nothing. They hand it over to this private company and they take zero responsibility. So everybody's passing it on to somebody else, and nobody wants to take responsibility, which means that our immigrant sisters and brothers and children are treated however they want to treat them. They have found many cases of attempted suicides. We don't hear about it. We don't know what happened. no investigation was done. So it's really a terrible thing happening in these detention centers, and we're trying to get some accountability.
Go ahead and do some research so you can learn more about detention centers making profit out of human beings. You can Google or go on YouTube and find immigrants for sale, and you'll have some nice data there that you can share with friends and family. We'll be back after this break.
¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?
Welcome back to CHIRLA TV. So we're reaching the end of the program today, and I want to make sure that we're able to tell the community what they can do to stay active, to be informed, and actually hold our politicians accountable. So Joseph, any last words that you want to share with us?
So first and foremost, follow CHIRLA, Twitter, Instagram, so that way you get the latest information. But I think what's going to happen towards the September is that there's going to be big negotiations in regards to the next federal budget. And we want to make sure that any money to DHS is actually brings accountability to that agency, that makes sure that our folks have dignity and respect if they're detained, and most importantly, that they do a process and their constitutional rights are protected. And so the call to action essentially is, especially when we have this toxic tone at the federal level, to people to really get engaged, talk to the member of Congress wherever they are, and make sure that they say, we want no more money for detention beds, and we want to make sure that ICE is held accountable.
And Senator, it's September. What do we need people to do in order to pass these bills of integration like the ones that you are a sponsor of and author of?
Well, one, we want to remind them that we want elected officials for 2019, not elected officials from 25 years ago when Prop 187. So act differently. Conduct yourself in the strongest way in support of immigrants and all immigrants. So that means calling Governor Gavin Newsom and saying, sign all of these bills. Health for our elders, dignity in detention, and we want everyone on boards and commissions. So that's what we need, everybody. Call the governor.
That's right. And so while we heard about some of the detrimental impacts of this administration's policies, we have champions here in the state of California, like Senator Elena Durazo. Thank you for joining us and for this intriguing conversation. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I am very happy to have both of you, Joseph and Senator Durazo, for being part of the show. We want to remind everybody to please reach out to your local legislator, stay informed, and reach out here in California to our Governor Gavin Newsom so that we can pass all these bills and have complete integration and always have a community fully inclusive of all immigrants. Thank you for joining us today at CHIRLA TV, and we'll see you next time.
¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes